What's going on, guys? I'm Ben Bateman.
And I'm Andrew Guy.
And we are
the Action Guys.
That was a weird intro.
It was super weird.
You're supposed to be the straight man. I'm zany and crazy.
Is that how this works? No one's amused but us.
No.
And
nobody.
Cody is gone.
And he's gone.
I'm still here.
Hey,
there it is.
But he didn't laugh, so.
That's
you
I
know.
would. That's good enough.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Action Guys here on the Collider Podcast Network. We are talking today about the definitive comic actors of the century.
Yeah.
There is a movie coming out this week. I think it actually came out this last week. Called The Kitchen. Stars two of its three dramatic leads are actually comedic actors, Tiffany Haddish and Melissa McCarthy, which got Andrew and I into the discussion of who is the definitive comedic actor right now? Who is the person who's crushing it, who we feel like is the definitive actor? And so that launched into a bigger conversation of sort of in our lifetime when we've been paying attention to movies as, you know, young adults to adults. Is there sort of like a comic championship belt, so to speak, per year? Somebody who feel like it's like their year, they owned the year.
Well, it's weird because even if that person doesn't have the top grossing film in the box office, even maybe not even in the top 5, sometimes not even the top 10, they'll have a few. And we all know it's like, oh, this guy, Larry the Cable Guy's been in everything this year, when it's really been like maybe 7 movies over the span of like 4 years.
It's the most interesting thing is this. We've gone back to look year by year. What we've actually found is it's extremely rare in a calendar year to find somebody who's got more than one major hit.
Right.
It's like usually one major hit with one supporting hit and then like a big one within a year of it.
Yeah.
But like most of these people, it's like 1 or 2 in the year.
Yeah, and like usually one will be in maybe the top 15. There'll be another one in the like maybe 25 to 50. And for you guys on audio and watching on video, Snickers is joining us in the studio. So if you hear some clanging of, I guess, his chain.
Yeah.
You see me dragging on a leash.
Yep.
That's Snickers.
Yeah.
Or it's actually Jason Statham. Still down there from last week.
We got him a collar this week.
We do get him a collar. He's upgrading the world. But
no shade, Jason.
Yeah, no shade, Jason. We know you're listening. But yeah, so you guys can find me at Andrew Guy. You can find the show on Twitter at Team Action Show. And of course, this entire episode will be up on video on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Action Industries.
Yeah, you guys can find me at Ben Bateman Media. We put up the full episode publicly on Friday on Action Industries. It's up early for patrons at patreon.com/Team Action on Tuesdays. There's also a ton of other cool stuff. We actually just literally got off a Skype call with the generals in the Action Army. There's 12 now generals, and you guys all get to be like a 10-minute conversation with us just before we go live on the show to kind of talk through what you think, what your choices would be. We run everything by you guys, and so if you're listening to this now, we appreciate all the help and support. And if you ever want to support at that level, that's one of the perks.
Yeah, patreon.com/Team Action. And of course, last thing to plug is we are doing the Action Guys live in New York. August 29th, 10:15 p.m. at the New York Comedy Club in the East Village. Ben and I will be doing a live show. It'll be a mix of this show, Action Movie Anatomy, which we do earlier in the day today over on the Popcorn Talk Network, and of course just our personalities, some impressions, maybe a little bit of Team Action might pop up for a good old throwback, some nostalgia, but it's going to be a great show, so get your tickets now. NewYorkComedyClub.com.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suggest we just get straight into things. You know, do you want to go backwards? Do you want to count backwards? How do you want to do it?
Start now because, Haddish and McCarthy are kind of the start of the conversation. And actually, if you look right now in 2018, the first year that we have up other than this year, because this year is obviously not finished yet.
Yeah, we're only halfway through it. We have 3 names here. And the 3 names that we have written down here for 2018 are Kevin Hart, Tiffany Haddish, and interestingly enough, Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Ryan is that he, with Deadpool being
it was
what
like
it
the
is,
number 6. Deadpool 2 was like the 6th highest grossing film.
And he's just, and he'll pop up in other cameos or like smaller roles. I mean, he was just like in The Hitman's Bodyguard a few years ago. Like he surprisingly has been doing, not surprisingly, but just he's just always on there. Like it seems like Ryan Reynolds has a movie in the last 5 years that's almost always on the list. Yeah,
he's crushing right now. So I think if especially if you're going to kind of combine a little bit of 2019, man, there's a full-on storm of people going on in the background here, guys.
Yeah, so what happens is the guys at Collider, they always have parties during our shows so that they don't have to invite us.
Yeah, it's pretty hilarious.
Snickers, sit down.
But if you look at this year, you've got The Upside with Kevin Hart.
Yep.
So, you've got that film. Going back into last year, where in 2018, the Kevin Hart film was Night School. Also with Tiffany Haddish. Also this year, you've got, she's in Grownish, or is that, no, not Grownish. Little? Is that her?
I'm not sure, honestly.
No, maybe it's Regina Hall. But she's definitely this year in The Kitchen, and obviously just coming off Girls Trip a couple years ago, she's kind of having a moment. And then it's safe to say jumping back another year to 2017, you have the same names, Kevin Hart, Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah.
Hard to avoid Ryan Reynolds being on the list just because in 2017 he had The Hitman's Bodyguard. It feels like he's just that guy. He's got a small cameo in Hobbs and Shaw we just saw.
Right.
Super funny.
I know, he's so good in that. And then, of course, you've got Kevin Hart. He does Jumanji in 2017. It's the 4th grossing film at $404 million. And he's just killing it. Like, he can't do wrong right now. He's going through one of these phases, the things that the idea of what really spawned this show is just like, oh yeah, there's a person that for a little stretch of time, usually it's like 5 or 6 years, where they just really can do no wrong, and everything they do makes a lot of money. And obviously Melissa McCarthy inspired that because she's in the kitchen.
Yeah, I mean, and if you had asked me, like, Melissa McCarthy last few years, is she the person? I would have said, I thought the last few years she was way closer to the top, but really, the last couple years, since about 2015, she's actually been a little quieter in terms of the quality of the movies and how well they were doing. So definitely feels like Kevin Hart is the guy holding the belt right now. Tiffany Haddish, though, is pretty close. And if you want to give Ryan Reynolds some credit, literally on all 3 of the last 3 years, 2018, 2017, and 2016, we've got Hart and Reynolds listed.
Yeah.
With Haddish in 2018 sneaking in, she's starting to really get some buzz now. She has like one really good movie. She could kind of own the next year.
Yeah, and if you're one of the people that's even in the conversation, even if you didn't have a huge year just other than just one big film, if your film is in the top 5, if it makes almost $500 million, it's hard not to say that it's just not Kevin Hart. So we're going to hop back for another year to 2016, and this year the people that we have listed are, of course, wow, my vision is just terrible. It's still Hart and Reynolds. Because in
Deadpool 1 in 2016, and then in 2016, Kevin Hart, I believe, has it's not Central Intelligence, because I think that was 2017.
Just look him
but
up
I think
here.
it's The Secret Life of Pets, maybe, like the 2 or something like that.
That might be it. I'm gonna just need our internet here to be up to par with the action guys. Up to par. Give me 1 second here. That party sounds like a lot of fun, man. I really wish I could be there.
Yeah, a cheese plate.
It's all right. We'll be there next year, man. We'll be there next year. So 2016 is he has The Secret Life of Pets and Central Intelligence, both in the same year, and Ride Along 2. So it's none of those are quite as successful as the prior year when he did Jumanji, but to not give him the tip of the hat once again just seems wrong, impossible. And then you even go the year before that. He's got The Wedding Ringer, Get Hard, and yeah, that's it. Snickers, come here.
So it definitely feels like 2016, and it's funny because it actually seems like we've been in a Kevin Hart moment for a few years now.
Yeah.
But I would definitely say specifically that it feels like his biggest year ever was 2016. That feels like just he was in everything. It's that moment. It happens a lot.
It really does. And honestly, so the 2 of those guys, they just dominate 15, 16, 17, all the way up into right now because Reynolds is still killing it. He was like my favorite part of Hobbs and Shaw. So now we're going to go into a different couple people. And obviously, this guy's going to pop up a lot. In 2015, we have, 2015, we have Farrell and Schumer. Now, Farrell has a few years that he dominates, but this was really Amy Schumer's moment where she had a lot of Netflix comedy specials this year, and of course, Trainwreck was the big one.
Yeah, Trainwreck, so it feels like it's the Schumer moment, but it's hard to give Schumer the year, for her to win the year necessarily, because really the only thing she did that was major was Trainwreck. And as big of a movie as that was, you look at what Farrell did in 2015, and though not the best movies, he still did Daddy's Home and Get Hard, respectively both in the top 30. They were like basically the number 20 and 30 film domestically. And like, it's just such a good reminder of like in terms of buzz, it's clearly Schumer. In terms of just that like mainstay box office power, this is the very end, I would say, of Will Ferrell having that draw. If you had told me like 2015 Will Ferrell, biggest comic actor in the world, I'd be like, I don't know, man. I think he was done in like 2010.
Same, 100%. But then you go and you look, and it's like, okay, those movies. And he does Get Hard, he does The Last Man on Earth, the TV show, he does Daddy's Home, and it truly felt like his moment had already passed. But that's going to happen a lot as we go through this list, is you'll kind of see like the changing of the guard almost. So this is kind of the end of Will Ferrell, but this started the beginning of Amy Schumer, and as we get into like the early 2000s, you're going to see that with a lot of names that end up just being mainstays.
Yeah, I mean, and Ferrell's a legend. I mean, of all the names on this list that we're going to see pop up, he's in the top 1 or 2 in terms of just like his all-time appeal.
Yeah.
We're huge fans, but it's also not surprising that he could sneak in so late, hold the belt for a year there. But you talk about a belt holder, a weird one the year before this, 2014. Now, this one, we looked at all the different contenders, and there was a lot of really interesting names on here.
Yep.
But I'll tell you, the most interesting name on the whole list, was somebody who starred in the number 3 and number 5 highest grossing films of the year domestically.
Which is insane because it's Chris Pratt. And he's a guy that has really now become more of an action star than he is a comedian or like a comedic actor.
The reason I would give Pratt the nod in 2014 is that Lego Movie's clearly a comedy, and he's funny in Lego Movie, right, as Emmett. Then also Guardians is a comedy action movie.
Yes.
And not only that, Guardians was the first time anybody had seen Chris Pratt in not chubby guy from Parks and Rec.
Yes.
So there was still an association with Chris Pratt of oh, he's the funny guy who's in big movies now. So he does feel like he's the guy that owns that year. Because the only other real option 2014 would be 22 Jump Street, if you wanted to talk to me about Jonah Hill or Channing Tatum or something like that, but that doesn't feel correct. It definitely feels like 2014 is the Chris Pratt year because he does Jurassic World the next summer. That's that year 14 to 15. That's his moment.
Yeah, and he kind of shares it, or he's about to start sharing it with Melissa McCarthy, who's had a couple years out there, but in 2014 she really only had Tammy is one of her bigger movies. But if you go back and you look at 2013, which is definitely Melissa McCarthy's year, that's when she's really making the most money. That's where her superstardom from Bridesmaids has kind of just taken her to the next level, the next tier of being a true superstar.
Because Bridesmaids is 2011. She gets the Oscar nom for that, which is a big deal. But then a couple years pass, they have to go make movies, right? That's how this works. If you go out there and all of a sudden your approval rating as an actor or an actress is so high, now the studio wants you to go make some movies. You got to film them, and then you have to put them in the can, promote them, and release them.
So in 2013, she does Identity Thief, The Hangover Part 3, and the big one is The Heat. Because in The Heat, she starred with Academy Award winner
Sandra Bullock,
America's sweetheart, famous forever Sandra Bullock,
and directed by Paul Feig, who had directed Bridesmaids.
Yes.
This was the repairing, the return. This was kind of. So Melissa McCarthy's a bigger woman, and when you have a physical comedian like that who uses their size as part of the bit, they don't come along that often, like a really, really good physical comic. And first of all, she's an amazing actress, and her comic timing is brilliant, but as well as that, she has the physical comedy going for her. And I just remember when seeing her career really start to happen was like, oh man, what was the last, prior to Melissa McCarthy, who's the last bigger physical comic?
I mean, and that's the other thing is you talk about Chris Farley, and it's not just his size that made him hilarious. It was his delivery. It was his actual becoming the characters, which is exactly what Melissa McCarthy does. And to compare the two of them, it almost feels cheap because you're like, oh, it's because they're both a little bigger. That's why. But it's that's not it. It's actually being a legend comedically who has the Jim Carrey effect, the Adam Sandler effect, the Chris Farley effect, where they just have this way of delivering lines and saying things. They just are so dialed.
Oh,
always
masterclass actors.
Masterclass.
The ability to deliver with the timing they have is absolutely next level. My question was more just, I'm looking at some of the other names on the list, and I'm trying to think to myself, another comedian who came along who
Well, that's what I'm saying is I really think it's Farley.
Yeah, prior to Melissa McCarthy,
Yeah, because bigger comedians out there or comedic actors that don't do it the same way that they do, but Chris Farley was always doing cartwheels and doing the worm and things like that. And Melissa McCarthy, we just covered Spy Alert today, and it's she has an action scene in that movie.
I guess Jack Black he's kind of heavier set, and definitely physical comedy was a big part of his bit, whether or not he was, but he used his body that way. He was really good at that. So maybe him. Anyway, continuing moving on, though. So Melissa McCarthy holds the belt in 2013. You jump down a year, and you got another weird year here. So right around this time, this 2010, 2011, 2012 sort of turn, what feels like's happening is that you're getting the Brat Pack, or not the Brat Pack crew, the Frat Pack, the Will Ferrell, Vince Vaughn, Ben Stiller, those guys, and that comedy has now given way to the Seth Rogen, the Judd Apatow crew.
Right.
But because that crew was kind of varied, you didn't have a clear cut this is the star.
Right, because in 2012 you did have, This Is 40, which is a movie with a lot of the people that you're talking about in there. But the crazy thing is it's actually someone who you wouldn't really think of as a comedic actor at all. But now when you think of him and you've seen what he's done over the last 8 years, you're like, God damn, Channing Tatum is hilarious.
He's hilarious. And 2012 is his year. Because the two of the biggest movies of the year were Magic Mike and 21 Jump Street, both of which are fantastic, both of which are hilarious, and both of which he is hilarious in.
And neither of those are actually in the top 20. But you look at the top 20, and there's a lot of other movies in there, a lot of action movies, comic book movies. You got Twilight Saga in there, you got Hunger Games in there. But as you like actual true comic movies or funny movies, I guess you have MIB 3, you have Ted. So you can't really give it to Wahlberg, right? It doesn't feel like giving it to Wahlberg is correct.
You could try to give it to Seth MacFarlane, I guess, but it doesn't feel. It feels like those two movies we just mentioned were like massive movies that year.
Yep.
And
it rebranded Tatum. When
was the last time you went back and watched 21?
It actually hasn't been as long as it feels like. It's hilarious. It's actually one of the funniest things ever.
When they show up to school, like some of the stuff that happens, like the one strapping.
Yeah.
Doesn't he calls the one kid gay, and he's like, "Yes, I'm gay."
Yes, I'm gay.
It's like so uncomfortable.
And it's super uncomfortable. And then you realize how much it's changed. The dynamics changed since from when we technically were in high school to how it is now. And like Channing Tatum's just a loser. He's the worst.
He's driving like a Mustang or something, and they call it like a gas guzzler.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Not into it.
Everything he does is lame, and Jonah Hill's just the coolest. It's so great.
That movie's so good.
All right, so the year before Tatum, we've got another weird year with 3 people going on. Who are they,
so 2011. And we'll start out with Kristen Wiig. And the reason is because Bridesmaids was the biggest comedy of the year by far. Bridesmaids was one of those comedies, like, they only come along every few years where everyone's talking about them. The rare comedy to have one of the performers get an Oscar nomination.
Yep. Did it get nominated for picture too or no?
I don't think so. Okay. Probably writing. I just know that Melissa McCarthy got that nomination for Best Supporting Actress, which she deserved because she's amazing.
Yeah, she's incredible in it.
But next up, behind Kristen Wiig, and it's just Kristen Wiig, it's just Bridesmaids.
Yeah, and this is kind of what we were talking about earlier, this was the moment where it's like, okay, now Kristen Wiig is going to be in everything for the next couple of years, but this was her moment of actually breaking through and making a lot of money. Because sometimes, even on a movie or a film where someone breaks through, it may not be that successful, but you may just see their role and be like, I want more Kristen Wiig in my life.
Right.
I need it.
Right.
And this year, so it was Kristen Wiig, and then we also have Emma Stone, which is interesting. But she's in Crazy Stupid Love,
which is a really funny movie. She's not particularly funny in it, but she's funny enough. She was having the America's Sweetheart moment as an actress in 2011, though.
Exactly.
Clearly, right? Because she's in Crazy Stupid Love, and she's in something else in 2010 as well, I believe, or 2011 as well.
Yeah, I gotta look.
She's in The Help in 2011, is what it is.
Yeah,
and that was a Best Picture nominated film.
So even though she wasn't like quite on the same page as Kristen Wiig because of like the actual comedy chops, it did feel wrong to leave her out because it was just such a massive year for her, and it wasn't like she's not who she is now. She was in The Help, and she was also in Friends with Benefits, was the other one in 2011.
Oh, she's a friend in that movie?
I think so, yeah.
What's interesting about that is that, Emma Stone had this moment in 2011 that you see happen sometimes where she had been the hot girl in Superbad.
Yep.
But she was kind of quirky. And so her next few years after Superbad was a series of them giving her movies like Easy A and where it was like
The House Bunny, Zombieland, Easy A.
Yeah, and it was like, okay, so she's going to be like the sassy, kind of quirky girl next door. She's not going to be like the hot girl necessarily. Oh, we could make her sort of quirky and funny. It was only like a couple years after that she was like, oh, actually, guys, I'm a really good actress. So I'm going to just win an Oscar and just be in a bunch of really good stuff. But at the time, there was this association with her as being kind of zany and funny that lands her on this list. And the last person on here, and this is a really weird one, is Jason Sudeikis.
Yeah, he was one of the SNL breakouts that we hadn't had in such a long time. But in this year, he had Horrible Bosses. And he also was
Hall
in
Pass, I
Hall
believe.
Pass. Yeah, which it's funny because Owen Wilson doesn't have a year. He's just he just pops
it's close.
up from time to time.
05, he's really close.
Yeah, but Sudeikis is another one of those guys that just kind of came and went for a minute there with Hot Tub Time Machine as well. It just felt like he was in everything and he was fine, but he was always playing the exact same character. Right?
And all these years where it feels like we're split, I would give this one to Kristen Wiig. Weirdly enough, even though it's just the one movie, I would still give it to Kristen Wiig.
It feels right, even though. Yeah, like you said, it's just the one movie, and Stones are more dramatic. Sudeikis is probably truly the guy that was actually in it that year, but what came of his career and what came of Kristen Wiig's career was astronomically different. So now as we hop into 2010, we get into Steve Carell and Zach Galifianakis.
Yeah, so Carell's 2010, right? That's got to be the Dinner for Schmucks. 2010's got to be Despicable Me 1. And I think he's probably got one other movie in there.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he does. Now, while you look up that other movie, the other name that comes up here is Zach Galifianakis. Now, Galifianakis is a fascinating one because the previous year in 2009, he had done Hangover.
Mm-hmm.
But, so he's the breakout star from The Hangover. Everybody loves him. And he does Due Date in 2010, which is with Downey. And I just remember that movie coming out and being like, okay, this is the Zach Galifianakis moment. He's that guy right now. And he never really became much more than that guy for a second. Like, pretty funny, but never, he was in The Campaign with Farrell a couple years later.
Right.
2011 maybe. But, like, he's the runner-up to Carell in 2010. And he is going to be the runner-up in the next year in 2009 as well. Spoiler.
Well, which is funny is because so many of these people, they end up being in movies together, right? Like, they end up working together at some point because it's just like, oh, well, I know how to make money. I mean, we were just talking about Emma Stone. Well, guess who was also in that movie was Steve Carell. So in 2010, he does Dinner for Schmucks, Despicable Me, and Date Night. So massive. Just huge, all the way across the board. Tina Fey had her moment for sure. Paul Rudd's just kind of always lurking in the background comedy-wise.
But he's never quite the guy, but almost the guy.
Yeah. He never is just the guy when it's comedy-wise. Because even I Love You, Man pops up. I think it's like maybe in, 2011 or 12 or something?
Maybe a little earlier than that.
A little earlier than that.
That might be like 07 or 09.
But it's not, he's not actually there. He's never number one.
No.
It just doesn't happen. So following year, or the next year, I should say, in 2009.
2009, yeah, we've got this now. Now we've got Galifianakis in his main year.
Yeah.
We've got him in the Hangover year, and it should have been his year, but it's just not quite there. We also have in 2009 Seth Rogen's in a bunch of stuff. I believe he's in Monsters vs. Aliens in 2009. I think he might be in Funny People in 2009.
They're fine. They're fine.
But the guy that we decided was going to be the comic actor for 2009 is Gerard Butler.
It's Gerard Butler. I mean,
it's not even because he's actually a comic actor, just because we love him so much. But he has 3 movies that year.
Yeah.
And they're all great.
They're all very, very good. Yes. Zach Galifianakis is in Up in the Air, G-Force, and The Hangover all in 2009. So he was definitely killing it. Jared, on the other hand, you said he had 3 films as well.
Law-abiding citizen.
Oh,
he's got Gamer, and I believe he's got The Ugly Truth.
I believe that is all 100% correct. And then the next year he has, in 2010, he does The Bounty Hunter with Aniston. So Jared's just like...
He's lurking.
He's lurking. He's been like the weird rom-com guy, and now he's just straight up just action.
I think if we're being completely honest with ourselves here, the answer is that Galifianakis is 2009.
Oh, 100%.
And it's just really because of The Hangover. Like, that was the movie. That was the Bridesmaids of 2009. That was the girls' trip. That was the one comedy everyone talks about from that year. And he's the guy. He's the breakout guy.
Yeah, and he's got a couple more paycheck movies, as it were. And then in 2008, it's another one of those people, one of the dramatic guys that has moved. I mean, he's done a lot of both, but Downey, it's RDJ.
Yeah, and this one was close, right? Danny McBride has a strong argument here
Yes.
because Danny McBride's in a few things in 2008. He shows up in Pineapple Express. He shows up in Tropic Thunder. But ultimately, if you think about it, I mean, Robert Downey Jr. is Tony Stark in 2008, which is it's a comic lead role. Like, he's so funny. His comic timing is perfect. And not only that, he's in Tropic Thunder in 2008, and he gets a supporting actor nomination at the Oscars for playing blackface. I mean, you talk about how difficult that is to do.
Yeah.
He was just America's sweetheart that year. There was just nobody who was going to beat Downey. Feels like 2008 is 100%. He holds the belt in 2008.
Yeah, and there's other people in there as well. Farrell is obviously still right there. You've also got Will Smith, who's been in a few years. He's kind of been lurking. Hancock was the 4th highest grossing film that year. It's massive. Made way more money.
Crazy, because that movie is like such a nothing movie.
I know. And then of course you also have Jack Black, who was in Kung Fu Panda. So all these guys still hanging out. Jack Black never actually steals a year, but that one has to go to RDJ. It's just too many big movies, and he also gets nominated for a comedic role.
I mean, this is kind of the comedy Oscars. If you're going to give the award to someone, it's like just because Annette Bening's a talented actress, she happens to go against Hilary Swank twice. That's what happens. So you'd think that Jack Black would have won one by now, but not quite. So you continue going down the list here, and coming up in 2007, this is the Seth Rogen year.
It is.
Yeah, and 07's the Seth Rogen year, and it's because he's in Superbad as one of the cops in 07, which is great, but then more importantly, he's in Knocked Up.
And he's also in Shrek the Third, which is a voice in there, which all the Shrek movies made so much money, but that just right there is like, oh, you're a superstar. You're going to be a voice in a Shrek movie, which is a massive, massive franchise. We all know that. I'm going to talk about it. You're going to be the lead in a Judd Apatow film in Knocked Up, which is he is on top of the world at the time. And then also you're going to be one of the funniest parts of Superbad, even though you're not one of the leads in it. But we need to figure out a way to get you in this movie about teenagers.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. Like, Rogen hadn't really been a guy that had much going on for a while. I mean, you go back to Freaks and Geeks, and he had kind of worked around here and there. He plays Cal in 40-Year-Old Virgin. That's a few years prior. But he hadn't really had that moment where, as an adult, he broke out.
It feels like Knocked Up was his moment.
Yeah, because this year was the moment for sure.
And I think a lot of that actually has to do with Katherine Heigl, because Katherine Heigl was on top of the world at that point because of Grey's.
Yeah. Yep.
And like it actually became a moment for her to kind of fall from stardom because of hearing about her on set.
Right.
The issues her and Rogen had, and it was his moment to just like shine. So now moving into 2005, we've got a really awesome year for our good friend here.
Yeah, so it's 2005. This is the greatest of all time. It's Will Ferrell. Yeah, he's my favorite on the list because Will Ferrell's one of my heroes. But 2005 is a big year for him. Talladega Nights, The Ballad of Ricky Bobby is 2005. That's his big year. This is kind of a weird one.
That's 2006. What he does in 2005 is he has Wedding Crashers, obviously, is Chaz. He has Bewitched with Nicole Kidman, Kicking and Screaming, and the Wendell Baker Story, and that's it right there.
So this is the sort of like, you are the biggest comedian in the world, we're going to give you everything you can handle year for Will Ferrell. Because the thing is, when I looked at 05, there wasn't really anybody else who jumped out as a more than one movie type of person. And this is as much about, Will Ferrell getting this in 05 is as much about him. Wait, this is 06.
Oh, you're on 06.
Right? Yeah. Because the year is listed above. Isn't that correct?
Oh, okay. I see.
Did we just get mixed up?
So honestly, Will Ferrell is probably 2005 and 2006.
No. 2005 is Vince Vaughn.
Yeah.
But we'll get there.
Yes, we
2006 is Will Ferrell because 2006 was I correct about that? Talladega Nights?
Talladega Nights and Stranger Than Fiction.
He's got another one in there, I think, as well, if you go down even further.
There's Curious George. Yeah. But he's like, he's Ted, man with the yellow hat in that one.
No, yeah, he totally is. I saw that movie because Will Ferrell was in it.
Really?
Totally. He's advertised. He's like the voice. Like,
of course.
He's the main speaking voice. That was a huge year for Will Ferrell. I think 2006 is arguably his biggest year he ever had, just because the level he was at, the kind of fame he had at that point. When you're the voice in Curious George, like, it's a kid's book you're making, and it's like, okay. And also Stranger Than Fiction, which is a very well-loved movie. And then Talladega Nights was like, that was kind of his first breakout.
That was the beginning of him and John C. like really doing it.
In the post Anchorman world, when he was just like Will Ferrell the brand, Talladega Nights is the first hit.
Yep.
It's the first real hit.
Yeah, because then you get in Blades of Glory the next year and things like Semi-Pro, Step Brothers.
But like, Talladega Nights was a big movie. So I think 2006 he definitely holds the belt.
Yeah, so 2005, my mistake.
Yeah,
from
2005
earlier.
You got Vince Vaughn. And I was waiting for a Vince Vaughn year to see if I was proper going to get one, because Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson, they're both in the same class here where they're really close, both of them. What ends up happening to Vince Vaughn in 2005 is it's the next year that he does the breakup in 06.
Right.
But in 05, Vince Vaughn's in Starsky and Hutch and The Wedding Crashers, I believe.
Yeah. And he this is kind of the moment. Oh, he's also in Be Cool. So he's in Be Cool, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and Wedding Crashers that year.
Yeah,
those
not
are the
Starsky.
three.
It was Mr. and Mrs. Smith is the other one I was thinking of.
Starsky's the year before that. So that's when he's starting to be like, he's starting to pop up more and more after doing Old School.
Yeah.
But this year, it felt like it had to be his. Wedding Crashers was just so massive. And then also Be Cool and Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Smith obviously made most of the money because of Brad and Angelina, but he's still the best friend. He's still in the movie almost the entire time.
Well, and also what happens is, like, guys, remember, as you're getting into like November, December, and it's the end of the year, and you're going to see a movie on Christmas, they start showing trailers for the films that are going to come out the next year.
Yes.
The buzz starts building for a movie like The Breakup before The Breakup even comes out. He kind of owns. That's the thing, is like when you have that transition into the next year, it can kind of mean you own a part of the year just based on the promotion that's happening. And so it definitely feels like Vince Vaughn owned 2005.
So as you move on to 2004, I was waiting for this guy to pop up because he's had so many of the movies. I mean, even movies we talked about already with like Tropic Thunder, but so many of the Meet the movies kept popping up because of Ben Stiller, whether it was Meet the Fockers, Meet the Parents too. But this year he did Along Came Polly, Starsky and Hutch, Envy, Dodgeball, Anchorman, Meet the Fockers. All of that in 2004.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about these guys from this era, and Stiller as a director, producer, star, writer.
Yeah,
he could sort of just make it all work, and he's hilarious in a lot of the movies you mentioned. He plays a great villain in Dodgeball. It's one of his great characters.
I love that character.
Or is it White?
It's White Goodman.
Yeah, White Goodman.
I'm white. Like when he says that,
he grabbed the bull by the horns, literally. No, but not really. But it happened.
Yeah, I mean and he still has it. But when Ben Stiller's dialed, it is a thing of beauty.
He's great. I mean, yeah, Ben Stiller, his like, if you had to talk about decade by decade who owned the decade, it's basically just Stiller and Farrell. Yeah. I'm pretty sure for the 2000s. It's just the two of them because they just did so much work, both of them.
And we loved everything they did. It was just spoon feeding us like crack. And we were like, yes,
every time.
Give me more.
I was always a way bigger Will Ferrell fan than a Ben Stiller fan, but I could appreciate when Ben Stiller was good.
Well, yeah, I was a bigger fan of Ferrell than Stiller as well, but it was still, you couldn't deny the fact that he was just massive, and what he did was great.
Yeah.
So, speaking of Ferrell, let's get to 2003.
Yeah, 2003, you've got another Will Ferrell year. So this is crazy. So Ferrell has now popped up in 2003, 2006. He shows up as a possible in 2015. We feel he beats Schumer. So that's 3 years now that he's had it, and he would have been a close runner-up in a bunch of these years in the 2000s here. But
he was only in 2 movies in 2003.
But they're huge ones.
They're massive.
It's the fact that he hadn't had a hit yet. Mm-hmm. He has the Tiffany Haddish in Girls Trip, the Zach Galifianakis in The Hangover moment.
Yeah.
When he does Old School, where he had been around, people knew him from Night at the Roxbury, people knew him from Superstar. You know, he had been in Austin Powers as Mustafa.
Yes.
But he shows up in Old School, and he's the funniest part of the movie, and everybody knows it.
He's just perfect. Frank the Tank, like, you're my boy Blue. Like, you can still quote Frank from Old School today, 16 years later, and people will get the reference. And then the other one is just, it's one of those, like, if you're a superstar comedian and you can get a great Christmas family film,
right,
then you're made, right? And Elf is exactly that. Not only did it make so much money, it has become a Christmas favorite, which means people watch it every single year. It plays on TV all the time. He probably makes so much money off of Elf still today.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the early Ferrell classics. And actually, to me, when I think about Elf, I never put this in the category of like a favorite because it doesn't feel like he had hit his stride yet to me. This still feels like he's making the transition. But people love this movie, and no doubt about it, it was a massive film that year.
I love Elf. I think it's a great movie. I think it's such a good family movie. And like I said, if you can get that money-making, take it to the bank Christmas film like that, then that's when you hit next level. That's like Jim Carrey level.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a reason, obviously, that you have 2006 Will Ferrell and 2003 Will Ferrell, and then in between there is Anchorman, and it is him showing up in all these other movies. He's got the part in Starsky and Hutch, and he's in Wedding Crashers, and that was just a big run for him. He had a few years there where he just was the guy. That was our high school years, man.
Yeah, and those were the years where we were getting just enough. We were getting just enough to where we always wanted more. Whereas later on, when we were in college, that's when you were kind of like, all right, man, slow down, please slow down. Then you got Step Brothers though, and you were like revitalized.
And then the other guys. Don't forget the other guys.
The other guys. You do love the other guys.
All right, so moving on to the next year here, you have an older name, one that I think we were both kind of figuring this would probably happen at a certain point.
We were waiting for it, and he had a moment after he got off of SNL. There was a time when he was popping up in movies all over the place. So I Married an Axe Murderer, and of course Wayne's World. They were massive.
Yeah,
but these years,
Mike Myers gets the 2002 Belt Holder Award, and I think the big reason is because Shrek is 2001, and so Shrek 2. Wait, this is 2002.
Yeah, and it's just because of Goldmember.
Yeah,
he's in Goldmember, but he's surrounded by Shrek. There's Shrek 4D, there's Shrek 2 the next year, there's Shrek 1 the year before. It was just that moment where it was like, okay, so Austin Powers has done so much work for me over these last 5-6 years. This is the year I get to do Goldmember, where I'm going to have John Travolta, Tom Cruise, these people all come in as quick.
Beyonce is going to be in here.
She's going to be the secondary character, or the second lead. And then also, by the way, I've got Shrek 1 the year before and Shrek 2 the next year.
Yeah, it does feel like he was... He does just feel like he was at his peak, the peak of his powers.
Yep.
Mike Myers was a global brand. He had all these multiple successes, but he's also you can see, right, like Mike Myers is the first name you're reading on here that doesn't feel like he's part of this era. He feels like he's almost like part of a previous era, and this is just him Because what often happens is after you've done your best work is when you make the most money and you're the biggest brand.
And the reason why, honestly, is because Farley died. That's why Mike Myers is even in the conversation, because Farley was supposed to be Shrek originally.
He was supposed to be Shrek,
and then he died, and Mike Myers took it over. So the end of Austin Powers in Goldmember was kind of whatever. I mean, it's fine.
Goldmember's funny enough.
It's funny enough. I think they get worse as they go on. One's the best, two's pretty good, three's fine.
Two's funny, yeah.
Yeah, but this is really like, okay, so now I get to do Shrek.
What's he say?
Austin Powers makes more
money. How about no, you creepy Dutch bastard?
No. It's so good. And also, like, you get that Eddie Murphy effect of playing all these different roles and people saying how talented you are again.
Yeah.
Because people had forgotten from the 90s where he did it all the time.
Did you ever hear the bit on Howard Stern where Stern's asking Dana Carvey about Dr. Evil and how...
Dana Carvey?
Oh, so Dr. Evil is Lorne Michaels, right? Like it's
okay. That's amazing.
Clearly, like it's it's obviously the same. If you listen to the voice, it's like the same bit.
Yeah.
And that was a character that had been created by Dana Carvey that they had always done on the show, and Myers took it and all of it and just put it in the movie. And it was a massive rift in their relationship. And you can watch this interview where Stern is asking him about it, and he's like, Carvey clearly doesn't like want to go down the road. He's like, I've never. He's like, yeah, it was upsetting to see, and he's like admitting that like he just stole the character.
Yeah,
and it's pretty interesting to watch. It's out there. It's just like a Stern clip.
Stern and Carvey.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to watch. That's fascinating.
Yeah. So, so that's Mike Myers in 2002, and then in 2001 you got Eddie Murphy, and I think the reason here is because you have Shrek 1 where he's Donkey, and that's a big deal, But you also have Dr. Dolittle 2,
and he's just been coming off of Bowfinger, Nutty Professor 2. Like the 90s was, I mean. 80s is when Eddie broke out.
Yeah.
The 90s was like his decade to dominate.
Yeah, it's like basically just Jim Carrey and Eddie Murphy in the 90s, and like that's what he does. And he's just, I mean, that's that thing that happens is like your brand name gets big enough, people think you're funny enough, you can get paid $20 million to do a bad comedy, and it doesn't happen very like as you're seeing on this list. That was kind of the point here. Most people don't get it for a decade. They get it for like 2 years.
Yeah.
When Eddie does Delirious and he does Raw in the late 80s, he does Coming to America and he does Trading Places. He does The Golden Child. Like his late 80s are crazy. The fact that the 90s were just pure Murphy as well.
Yep.
I mean, he got to do this for like 12 years.
Well, the 90s was such an interesting time, right? Because there were other people that had it as well. Like Sandler had it. Jim Carrey had it. Mike Myers didn't quite. He had it at the beginning. But yeah, Eddie Murphy definitely owned it. And so, I just said his name, so I might as well move on and talk about him. We got in the year of 2000.
Jim Carrey.
And this is crazy. The myth, the legend.
This is crazy to me that this is the first Jim Carrey sighting. And I guess it's because the 90s were more the Carrey decade.
Yeah.
But 2000's big because he's got How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
Which was the #1 movie of the year.
And he's also got Me, Myself, and Irene.
Which I love.
Never seen it.
It's so good, dude.
Yeah.
And he just came off of doing Man on the Moon. He just is about to go into doing The Majestic. This is when he's still working like crazy. I think In Living Color is still going on. It's just about to end. I think it ends in 2001.
Interesting. I didn't realize that.
I don't know if he was still on it or if he just pops in as like a cameo, like best of or something.
Because his big year is 94, and then through the 90s he does the sequel to Ace Ventura.
He does Batman.
Yeah, he's in huge movies. I mean, a massive superstar. But it just 2000 when you're in the #1 movie of the year, and then Me, Myself, and Irene I would call the last comedy in his run of like the classic Carrey comedies.
Yeah, because after that, it's where it starts to tip towards different things. He does The Majestic, he does Bruce Almighty, he does Eternal Sunshine. So things start to change just a little bit. And like the next true comedy, I guess, is Fun with Dick and Jane, and it just feels a lot different.
Yeah, I mean, Me, Myself, and Irene is like pretty R-rated.
It's very R-rated,
and it's like that's just like the end of the first run. Like I remember that movie coming out and still feeling like we were pretty close to the Carrey that I had grown up with.
Yep.
And this was just another Jim Carrey movie. But by the time Bruce Almighty came out, it felt like he had gone softer. He was a little more family friendly, a little less like raunchy
less
and weird.
Edgy, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that movie's pretty straight down the middle. It's like.
Yeah. I mean, it really is. Fun with Dick and Jane, you're saying?
No, Bruce Almighty.
Oh, Bruce Almighty. Yeah, that's a definite family movie. There's like moments of whatever.
Yeah.
Steve Carell pops in as the bad guy, which I love when Bradley Cooper pops in as the bad guy in Wedding Crashers. And you know what? Ladies started the list, so they might as well finish the list. In 1999, there's a lot of people in contention, but it's really, truly Julia Roberts.
It's my girl, Julie. I love her so much. I've watched all her movies this year for the first time.
You've seen every single one of her films now?
No, but I watched all the classic rom-coms I'd never seen any of. I watched all of them this year. So I watched Notting Hill and I watched Runaway Bride, both of which are 1999.
Yeah, and they're amazing. I love Notting Hill. I love Runaway Bride. The next year, she wins the Oscar for Erin Brockovich. The year before that, she's doing Stepmom. She's doing Conspiracy Theory. She's like working her way up.
In 97, she does Best Friend's Wedding. That's her comeback movie. But between 97 and 99, she does all three of those rom-coms. Now, you could just as easily have called it Hugh Grant if you wanted to, because Hugh Grant's got a pretty big 99 as well. But
for sure.
It just feels like she is the love of, like the late 90s, 99. What feels like is happening is the preferred genre, the preferred like part of the comedy genre that's making the most money. They're rom-coms.
They are.
Like that's
100%.
Like people are really, really into the rom-com at that point. It's become very commercialized. They open really well. They're very funny. And Julia Roberts was the poster child for that. So I think 99 is pretty fair to say that's Julia Roberts.
Yeah, because then she goes on to Erin Brockovich, like I said, to win the Oscar in 2000. In 2001, she's got The Mexican, America's Sweethearts, and Ocean's 11.
Immediately starts to lose quality.
And then she falls off. Yeah. So, I mean, that in our minds, the way we did this was, it was looking at their stardom, their star power, how successful the movies were financially, and also just like in remembering the movies and actually like having an impact on you. When you talk about those movies from Julia Roberts in 99, they're all classics. You remember all of them. There's all quotable lines. Like the fact that you can still say I'm just a girl standing in front of a boy asking him to love her 20 years later in a Julia Roberts movie.
It's a good one.
It's a great line. It's a great line.
So that's going to wrap up the segment, guys. Now, Drew, if you had to vote by decade, 2000s, 2010s, who's the number one for you?
So 2000s, it has to be Farrell for me.
Feels like it's an easy slam dunk, right?
Yeah, I feel like he's just the guy. And as you saw in the 2010s, we had a lot more of these split years because that's just kind of what happens. There's just so many more different types of movies. It's not just one person that dominates. I guess if I'm going to do the 2010s, you go... I guess maybe McCarthy, even though she only had like 1 year in there.
She's got a few. It feels like it's, McCarthy's big. Hart's
massive.
Pretty big.
Yeah.
But his moment feels a little more like recency bias.
I guess. Sorry, go ahead.
I think I might honestly say Seth Rogen. I know that's weird, but it feels like the respect that Seth Rogen has demanded in the last decade is insane. Like, if you go all the way back... You go all the way back to like anything from like Sausage Party to This Is the End to like you go all the way up to him playing Pumbaa in the new Lion King.
He's great in that.
Like he's just the guy's in a lot. He works a lot. He's very consistently funny, and he feels like for a decade he's been a threat.
And I'm not scared. I'm not annoyed of him.
No,
I don't mind.
Survived.
I don't mind seeing him keep popping up. Like every time I see Seth Rogen cast in something, I'm always like, cool. I'm into that, right?
Yeah, if you're talking for a decade, he feels like he'd be my vote. I think you could make a pretty good case for Kevin Hart.
For sure.
And you could make a pretty good case for Melissa McCarthy. Considering Bridesmaids is 2011 and The Kitchen came out this week, she's had a pretty good body of work. So maybe it's her, but it feels like from like the producer, the writer, the whole bit, I think I got to give it to Rogen. There's a couple honorable mentions too we never even got to.
Yeah,
Jason Segel never came up.
Yeah, Jason Segel never came up. We did mention Paul Rudd, but he never made it. Will Smith, honestly, him and his rom-coms or him and his like action comedies were always very, very close.
Kevin James never got mentioned.
Yeah, Larry the Cable Guy had a minute there too.
Sandler never got a year. Dane Cook. I mean, there's a lot of these comedians who have their moments, but it feels like maybe it's a miss that Sandler didn't have a year. But honestly,
I think we just didn't get far enough back. Really?
I mean, maybe like you'd be talking about
Madison and Gilmore.
You would just be talking about the Gilmore year because Madison, he only has one movie each those years.
Yep.
He's in other movies, but I feel like he might have had a 90s year.
Now, if we had the conversation of which comedic actors were dominating the decade, you would mention Sandler, you'd mention Carrey more often, and then you'd mention Eddie Murphy.
I think the 90s would just clearly just be Jim Carrey.
I think it just is.
Because Sandler is in like a few movies, and a couple of them are good, and Farley's in a few movies, but only two of them are good.
Yeah.
Like Carrey has that 1 year. He has the triple year.
The 94.
Yeah, he has The Mask, Dumb and Dumber, and Ace Ventura all the same year. Like, plus you start to throw in the sequels, Liar Liar.
Yeah, Truman Show's mixed in towards the end.
Yeah, his 90s are nuts. Yeah.
So let us know what you guys think about each of our years. We'd love to see your list counting down from 2019 to 99. Let us know if there's people that we missed in a specific year that you think belong in there, or people that are on our list that you actually think don't belong there. So all these things we would love to read down below in the comments comment section. Wow, it was so close. And remember, you can find this show all on video on the YouTube page of Action Industries, youtube.com/Action Industries, and on all audio podcast apps, whether you're on Apple Music or Apple Podcast, I think is what it's called, Podcast Addict, whatever it is. Find us on the Collider Factory feed, The Action Guys. Make sure to download this episode.
Yeah, thanks for listening, guys. Thanks for watching. Remember to check out patreon.com/Team Action and go support if you guys want to help us keep doing what we're doing. Action Live, New York, August 29th, 10:15. Get your tickets. East Village. It's going to be so much fun. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, guys. We salute you.
Bye.